feel like I've always had a dark sense of humor and been like grim or whatever things didn't like bother me. Like I remember my mother giving me the lottery to read when I was a little kid. That was the type of story that would like just absolutely like capture my imagination sometimes. And also seeing how with horror, it's definitely a place where you can choose how much to show. Like sometimes you scare, sometimes something's frightening, you frighten people or you bring about certain things by what isn't shown, all in what it you allow the mind to fill in the blanks on.
Microphone check, 1 2. What is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service. Here we are again at the end of the rainbow. When you have a catalog as deep and renowned as Billy Wood's, finding a way to consistently create something new that stands out, matches, or even improves on past work is a very difficult thing. But as has been the case with Wood's for many years now, the man did it again. It's not like Wood's has reinvented himself necessarily on this latest album. His wry wit, sharp storytelling, and ear for great production are still present on this new record. But now these elements are funneled through an ambitious horror-themed experience shrouded in darkness, wrought with interesting political insight and poignant, thought-provoking perspective on the effects that these oppressive systems have on people in this society, particularly those living on the margins of it. This new album has an argument for being the best record of Wood's entire storied career, and that's saying something. In today's episode, Wood's provides color to the inspiration for his new album, the horror influence, his take on being viewed as an abstract artist, some of the most pivotal moments of the record, and much more. Wood's is one of the most fascinating people to talk to on many subjects: music, politics, and sports, as you will hear later. So make sure you lock into this episode and get a glimpse into the mind of a living legend. The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth artist interviews, album reviews, and general rap commentary on the best that the underground rap scene has to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. Woods, how you doing today?
Yo, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm chilling. I'm chilling. This is a really exciting conversation for me because this record is just it's just fucking amazing, and I think it hit me in a really good time, in the right time, as we'll kind of get into it in more detail. But we record this a week after the album dropped, and the reception I feel has been like extremely positive from what I've observed. The buzz I think is as far reaching as I can remember with a record of yours. And with this context of like your rise in notoriety and acclaim in mind, your fan base obviously is continuing to expand past that original niche of smaller niche of heads that were in the know within the underground sphere, as your music is naturally being heard by more and more people who are far removed from potentially where you live, how you grew up, and what you value potentially. And I wonder how you feel about that dynamic, because especially as someone who's values their privacy, does it potentially make you a bit like uncomfortable to be perceived by so many people, let alone people that are may very well not even like understand where you're even coming from?
Do thoughts cross my mind? Sure. I think at the same time, I have a couple thoughts about that. One is that I think that that has always been happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously that's probably always been happening in history, but it's been happening in my career for some time. There were people who like when Hiding Places came out, it was like, wow, you got, new fans. When Haram came out, it was like, oh shit, you got when Paraffin kind of blew, oh, now you guys have more following. Haram's out. Now there's more, you know. Oh, you did a record with no name. More, so I don't have streaming. I don't really see the numbers. I know that my streaming numbers are not particularly impressive, all things considered. I guess I just feel like that's always been happening in terms of like expansion.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes faster than others, but slowly, like there's always new things happening. I think the other part of that is that there have always been people into the music who are far away from my existence, how I grew up, some of the things I was talking about, always
Mm-hmm.
in mad different ways. I used to have a guy who used to write way, way back. Like I'm talking like I feel like it was like Supercon days until maybe like History Will Absolve Me. He would periodically send me letters from prison in California. It's fan, constantly
Mm.
doing bids, usually weapons possession stuff or violation of parole, violation of probation. I still have a bunch of letters from this guy, um,
Wow.
uh, if he's still alive. Uh, and it would be like he was really into it. He had like gotten camouflage and news had been a fan since then. And it's like our lives didn't have a whole lot in common. He was from California, um, dropped out of high school, had been in and out of, was just like a street cat in and out of jail. I think my guess is that he was Latino. Anyway, just totally different. Totally, totally different. But there are points of convergence, you know what I mean? So, because even if somebody's like, oh, I'm a, African American New Yorker, there's still going to be points of separation because I grew up in different places and, I've lived my life as a black man in America, but my parents' histories in different places and like, there's always points of divergence and convergence, I feel like. So sometimes somebody might be like, oh, this really meant something to me. And maybe it would be some aspect about, you know, family or struggles with uh, drugs or depression. You know, there's hopefully there's enough material in there that it's not like you have to be to me, and this is not a judgment of anybody else, to me, I would feel like it was disappointing if, in order to appreciate my music, you had to like, or my art, you had to like specifically gone through all these exact experiences, be very much like me and know where I'm coming
Mm-hmm.
from. That's cool. And I think it's important. It would also be weird if nobody who shared any aspects of your background got it. But yeah, I would hope that stuff I would make would also have resonance on some type of a human level that moves beyond that. Sort of the same way, like I would read Joseph Conrad as a kid and be like, man, my mind's blown. I don't. The rest of that shit about we don't have a thing in common. You know what I mean? And that's the great thing about like to me, again, not anybody, my opinion. That's the great thing about great art and things like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes sense. Like, I feel your music definitely like invites, it's not about like this very narrow set of things that only people who grew up exactly like you could relate to. And I think there's a lot to be taken from people of a variety of different backgrounds. I think especially this album actually, in a lot of ways, as we'll talk about a little more later. When we look at getting into this new album specifically, I want to go right from the beginning, not even when you were writing the records and recording songs, but obviously I understand that a key inspiration for this album's, direction was re-exploring an old story you wrote I believe it was 9 years old, as a 9-year-old child.
I feel like I may have over that may have been overemphasized. That was a moment of being like, oh, there's this word, like sometimes I'll just, a word or a phrase or an idea, I'll write it down in my
Mm,
notes. And that was a moment of being like, oh, I like this idea. I like the word. First of all, I like the word gollywog and a lot of things about it. So I was like, oh, let me just put that word down. And I did note that also that, I that idea of like this horror story, but I really was just like wrote the word down. And then I came back to it when I was like, all right, what am I gonna do? And I'm looking through my note thing and I was like, oh yeah, there's that. And what could and then I went down that road. So it wasn't so much like I found the story and then was like, this is my album.
What was it about that word, or what was it about like this idea that you felt was like, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to explore this on my new album.
Some words just feel good in your mouth. It has a good feel. And it also is an odd word that people aren't that familiar here. When you write it down, I wouldn't be surprised if it's an even number of letters, although I really have no idea. And it ends and starts with the same letter, which gives it a little bit of symmetry. It looks good on a piece of paper. It has a certain je ne sais quoi when you say it. Some words just are like a good word.
Yeah, and with like I guess keeping with that idea of like your upbringing, even just the fact that you were writing stories that young is definitely like not is definitely pretty unique in its own sense. And when I think about your upbringing and the fact that your dad was notably a Marxist revolutionary, it's a safe assumption that you were raised with a, similarly leftist kind of point of view, worldview. And from what I gather from your music, of course, and
That'd be understating it.
yeah, I am. I know that.
Well, I do always want to couch the fact I don't want to be like he wasn't a revolutionary because he was, because revolutionary writing is revolutionary writing. At the end of his life, he was a bureaucrat in a government. And before that, his main thing was he was an academic.
Hmm.
I mean, he was active, he was raising money, he was writing, he was um he was a party member. So, it counts. My dad wasn't like crouched in the bush with an AK-47, bandoliers wrapped around him.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, that's important. That's
Maybe he
important
should have
context too. Uh, but whatever that aside, like from what I gather from your music and in conversation with you, you certainly seem to align with that general point of view quite a bit.
Sure,
And
yes.
yeah,
I grew up in a very, very left-wing environment, 100%.
yeah, exactly. And it brings me to this line that you say on the record that I find was pretty interesting, where you say that you were reading the stirring words of dead revolutionaries who were wrong, and it made me think about like reevaluating old ways of the past when it comes to thinking about politics, and I'm wondering, is there any kind of like notable political view or idea that you feel differs, has evolved now in comparison to how your dad may have raised you when you were younger, or have your primary beliefs largely kind of just stayed relatively
Oh,
similar
my
over the
own
years?
ones.
Yeah, your own.
I think one of my father's big projects was sort of the generation of an African Marxism. There was a Marxist Leninist who wanted to adapt that and figure out how the ways in which that could be adapted to and applied to a sort of African ownership and generation instead of simply placing it like a grid from, industrial Eastern Europe, Central Asia to at the turn of the century to like a mostly agrarian society,
Mm,
Southern Africa at the end of the next century. So I think I already grew up in an environment where it wasn't like, he wasn't sitting there being like they're lying about Stalin or something, like
hmm
was a there had already been an idea that Marxist Leninism was something that needed to be molded and adapted in a practical sense. Whether anyone actually bothered to do that is a separate question. But it's not like my father ran the entire Zimbabwe government, so it's not hard to necessarily put that on him. But things that I grew up with that I still believe or that I don't.
that you don't, that have changed.
I grew up with, I don't know. I don't want to be uncharitable to people who I think are really, their hearts are often in the right place, and they're speaking on behalf of of the weak, and I appreciate that. But I grew up sort of with this idea of like these people as heroes and like beyond like reality, like seeing like Fidel Castro as like the Pope or something.
Mm,
I mean, that maybe not quite like that, but as a child, it was a big deal. And to a certain extent, I think that some of these things, some of those belief systems kind of became their own sort of church or religion, you know what I mean? Where you're like, I don't know. I grew up with an admiration for the Cubans, especially in Southern Africa. They came to basically save the day in Angola against the South Africans and stuff like that, where it took me a long time in life, for example, to like be able to really critique and see the Cuban Revolution and its aftermath and current state from a more nuanced point of view than I did as a child. I really was like, I mean, and also the times were different, there was like leftist movements were, in the 70s, leftist movements were ascending all around the developing world. The evil empire was being rolled back, and then I think being able to look at what went wrong and why. I think after that point, by the 1990s, it starts to be like, well, we gotta either you're just going to move on with the belief of everything fits still into that same paradigm, or you might start looking at more nuanced views of all of those things around us. And ultimately, I mean, I'm not afraid, because sometimes when you say it's a failure, like if I said the in the end, like Castro failed, it doesn't mean that the Cuban Revolution should have never happened or was a
mm,
idea. Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. If it's like if you are the GM of a team and you put it all together, and it's like it never really all worked out. You never got to the place. You had some good wild card victories, and then the team is back drafted first again. I'm not going to lie to you and say that you succeeded. That is a lie. And I don't think that a lot of times I think that in looking at why and how you failed and things failed, you can actually gain a lot. Whereas just being like, America had an embargo on, yeah, I mean, that's true. They're enemies, and America's embargo made things very difficult. But that's a given, you know what I mean? It's a given. If I say the Black Panthers failed and somebody's like, well, the US had counter-pro, it's like, you're trying to overthrow the government. Are they supposed to help?
mm.
I'm just saying, it's not to be uncharitable towards the young people who didn't know what they were up against and who lost their lot, and nothing to do with the rightness of people's cause or vision. But yes, if your plan is to overthrow the United States government, some part of you should expect and factor in their resistance. And so you're judged on that. Failed to overthrow the government because they resisted you, then I mean that's a given. We all knew that was going to happen. And so I think sometimes being able to look at people, not, and I also in that is like a type of sometimes a hero worship that I think as a child and, a young person who feels passionately about things, sometimes you just are like, you can get into that mindset of like, oh, this person or this cause or this movement or this organization, I support it. But then you get to the point where like you can no longer critically assess it. And if things come along that like challenge your view of a person or movement or a particular organization, it feels like admitting that there's a problem is saying that the whole thing was wrong or something like that. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? If somebody has a critical view of Hamas, I don't think that that means that that is totally plausible and real for that to be the case and for you to support the Palestinian cause wholeheartedly. And I don't have to, you don't have to, people are not necessarily going to agree on a single person shouldn't come to embody, or like, if I don't support this person, then I don't support the wider ideas behind this. And sometimes I think people get caught up in that, and that's where you can get in trouble. And certainly as a kid, I feel like it was like, if I say something bad about Castro, then it's kind of like I'm throwing the whole thing away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like that. Or like, if I don't care what ZANU-PF did after, or whatever, the failure of the post-colonial Zimbabwe state. That has nothing to do with the fact that Rhodesia was an illegitimate, racist, terrorist state that had to go. Maybe now ZANU-PF has to go. That has nothing to do with the fact that the Rhodesians had to go.
Yeah, it's like, especially when you're a child, right? Like your identity is still forming. You're in such like a malleable state. Those beliefs you get when you're young or develop, like they become so intertwined with your identity to where, yeah, like you going, even having a nuanced critique of something you initially thought was like, all good and just perfect in your very childlike way, it's really hard to do. I mean, that's what it's like, that goes with everything, right? Anything that you kind of pick up when you're a child, it becomes very hard to look at differently.
Even if you pick it up when you're adult. I think sometimes people who, what's the thing they always say, the
Oh, they're like the hardest. They believe
convert will
that
be
shit
more
the
radical
hardest.
than the
Yeah.
people who grew up, the dude who started going to the mosque when he was 25 and decided to turn his life around, end up more hardcore than the guy who grew up in it his whole life.
Mm.
Because maybe at that point you've put so much into, you're like, oh, I'm going to change my life. I'm a Muslim, whatever, or get into revolutionary thought, whatever it is. Then that becomes like the bedrock for like how you view this new self of yours. And so any threat to that becomes a threat to this whole project of yourself. And that's when it gets really dangerous. About if you're like a hardcore Trump supporter, right? How many of your friends have you been like, nah, friendships lost, family members that don't talk, co-workers you pissed off, and then new connections, new friends, and new sort of quote unquote family that you found, whether online or in person, through the fact that you are MAGA, whatever, whatever. At a certain point, the cost of being like, man, Donald Trump is a lying grifter, it starts to become very high, because then it's like, oh shit, everything I built and shaped my life around for 10 years, these relationships that I lost, these situations that, I got myself into, uh, 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 fights I had, it was all just a waste. You know what I mean? That's like a hard thing for people to accept. Like when I think about Jonestown and, Jim Jones, Jonestown, Guyana, the whole camp, they all drink the Kool-Aid. Man, some of those people probably at that point, things were not going well in the jungle, but at that point, some of those people had been following Jim Jones. They had sold everything they had in San Francisco and moved here and moved there. They separated from friends and family. They'd taken their kids, sometimes against the will of other family members or parents. They'd given everything, come to this jungle in Guyana, and like shit is not going right. And at a certain point, you might just be like, at this point, either this shit is real or I'm done with it. I'm not starting again. You know what I mean? That's just the thing that happens with identity and how people think about You invest so much in something that it's like, nah, I don't care. Don't show me. I'm not interested in the evidence. Like if Jim Jones is not the prophet, I'm drinking this Kool-Aid one way or the other.
It gets comfortable. It feels good to be like hermetically sealed in
And
your
it's dangerous to go, but that's dangerous. You know what I mean?
hmm
Like, what if I've spent so much of my life doing art and feeling like it was important? What if somebody empirically was able to just be like, man, none of that shit was good or worth anything or something? It would be hard for me to readjust to a thought of myself as like not being an artist. Because that's all I ever thought about being.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like if there's some study where it's like studies show 100% of the time being exposed to difficult situations make people more depressed and they do bad, violent activities. Like if that some bullshit was real, that'd be hard. Even as a listener, I'd be like, what the fuck? But I want to listen to this. I'm just gonna stop listening to bad, quote unquote, dark music because it talks about these things because it's gonna make me violent. Like I don't know how easy that is to just accept and change my life accordingly. Like,
Yeah, it's hard when you already have this conception. Of course, the proud, do not decide to build your life around a professional grifter
hmm
and con man. But yeah,
this concept of like Afro-pessimism is something that I know has been linked to this album specifically, and it's a worldview that I've been noodling with as I've given this album more listens, where I do definitely see that there's this sobering assessment of where we are today as society, particularly specifically where Black folks are positioned in society and treated in this current system. I guess my question is like in the current state we're in now societally, like, do you feel like you share a perspective that still has some faith in like, potential down the line to have a closer representation of your ideals to be coming to fruition either in America or elsewhere, or is shit just too far gone to where like your prevailing sentiment is like, yeah, this isn't gonna end well.
when did anything ever end well? I
Right.
mean, I guess it depends. What constitutes as the end? We haven't reached the end of time, so it's like lots of things end well, and then you start a news cycle where they start going bad. There's, I guess I would say that I don't believe that my music is inherently nihilistic. So if that
Yeah.
answers it at all.
Yeah, I don't think it is either, and I guess that's the part where like I was looking at a lot of like reviews and just listening to people's thoughts on the album, and that came up a lot, of course, where it's like, oh, be aware though when you're listening to this album, like it's gonna be leave you very depressed and very this and that. It's very nihilistic or pessimistic, whatever. And it's like I get what they're where they're coming from, but I know I just don't know if I agree because on the other hand of where you're talking about these really difficult, challenging things, I just feel like there's also you have this really great ability of being able to cultivate humanity in the characters or in the situations that you're describing to where like I feel like it's also showing like this like way of moving forward of this survival that you can kind of move forward and make do. And so like I don't know, I just don't take it as this thing that brings me down all the time. It definitely makes me think about difficult things, but it doesn't really have that overall effect on me.
Yeah, I guess it depends a lot on what your relationship is to what type of media, like sometimes you'll just realize, I think everyone, no, not everyone. I certainly have had experiences where I'd be just watching a movie and then somebody comes in and they're like, "Oh, damn, you're watching something this heavy at this time or whatever." Something like that where I'm like, it's an interesting movie. I didn't
hmm
really what could be heavy to some people to me might just be like interesting. And then I'll when the person points out that it's heavy, I could note that, okay, I know what they're getting at, but it didn't make me necessarily feel that way. Or I'm more comfortable with that type of feeling to begin with, maybe. You know what I mean? Like I know people who'd be like, man, when I get home from work, I just need to watch something that's like mindless. And I would never be like, that's wrong or something. I just never really felt like that. It's like I could come home from work and watch a documentary about what's that documentary about the Indonesian, I think that's what it was, the Indonesian, like where the killers, the anti-communists guys that killed all these people during the Indonesian Revolution, like reenact all their crimes. They made two of them. It's really bugged out. I want to say it's Werner Herzog, but it can't be. It's not.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I definitely, I think it's the latter. You were saying like either, you just find it interesting or it's like heavy, or you're just more comfortable with that heaviness. Like I'm definitely of that in that latter camp where I just don't enjoy watching typically or absorbing media that's like on the more mindless side. Not because it's wrong, like you said. I like the feeling it makes me feel. I like feeling activated in that way. Like I'm reading this book, A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry. I'm not sure if you're familiar. It's pretty relatively known, I guess. He's like an Indian Canadian author. It's about like Emergency Act era India. It follows four characters, and it's incredibly bleak. Like it certainly is, but it's just also amazingly read. He has a lot of comparisons to Charles Dickens, and I just like can't get enough of it. It makes me like feel emotionally activated and like maybe even gives me perspective. Like I like those feelings. I feel like that makes me sleep well at night. Whereas others, they're like, how do you read this? This is just so sad and depressing constantly. But to each their
The
own, I
movie I
guess.
was thinking of, yeah, I get what you're saying totally. The movie I was thinking of is called The Act of Killing,
Mm.
and then it had a sequel called The Look of Silence. Pretty crazy. That is intense. But yeah, I tend to just be like, if it was good, I would watch it. Oh, people also give me shit about like when Lucid and I are on tour, like on a plane, he doesn't believe in watching anything like serious on a plane. Although that's not, he watched Soundtrack to a Coup, which I have been trying to watch on a flight, and it's not on any flights I've been on recently. I might need to just try to watch it at home, but I really want to see that movie. But he's like lighthearted fare on a plane. Why would you watch like a serious or good movie on like a tiny little screen while you're in a tube flying through the sky? I'm like, I don't know. If I think it's gonna be good, I'll
I didn't
watch
know
it.
there was some rules about that, to be
People
honest.
people will be like, "Oh, what are you watching?" Like, I watch like funny movies or something like really easygoing or something to fall asleep to, and I'm like, I will fall asleep to The Brutalist. In fact, that movie was bad, so I did fall asleep,
Mm.
long and bad. But yeah, I guess that's I agree with what you're saying, but I see how for some people maybe if you're careful about engaging with that sort of material, or you're not just not that comfortable, then it's a very specific mood that you have to be in to like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
happens all the time. Like I remember being like, "Hey, you should check out The Wire," and people would be like, "Man," I remember this one woman was like, "Yeah, it's just so heavy. I don't think I can like watch that on a weekday, like after work."
Hmm.
I'm like, what? That shit is to me, it's that, yeah, it's like, I don't know. So all of that is, again, I chalk it up to what sort of stuff you're normally encountering or dealing with and how comfortable you are with it. This album's kind of funny, to be honest.
Getting to the recording process for this album a bit more, you did an interview that was really dope with Jacobin, I think it was last year, where you stated that you always try to have a new methodology for a record, trying to keep the experience for each project fresh, challenging, and unique. So I'm wondering for this new album, what was that methodology? What did that look like?
I guess I intended to work on, I intended to really take my time working on the album. And I had this whole idea that the songs would be self-contained, resolving the, like short stories of a sort. But I wanted to work slowly because sometimes when it hits a stride, if I'm able to do it, I can work pretty fast. it's like a lot of times when I make a album, it's like a snowball effect, where by the end it's like you start rolling and you're just, like at the end of making maps, song like Houdini, like Kenny made the beat, I wrote the song, we recorded it, in 24 hours, maybe less. But once it really gets rolling, I might be like doing two songs at a time when I go to the studio or something, or just going to the studio a lot in a week. So it's rolling. I still tried to work slowly, even though things ended up different than how I had imagined.
Hmm.
Working on the album, my surrounding work environment was lighter, so I kind of was just focusing on this, whereas I had previously thought, I'd be doing a couple different things, so I'd just be ducking out to do one of the songs for my album and then stashing it. But it was still a little bit like that. I was working slow enough that I remember Revelator coming out, or me, it wasn't out. Me hearing the like final version and semi-final versions and being like, man, this is crazy. I'm glad my record doesn't have to be out this year. I want to compete with this. And now I feel inspired to go back in and do more with what I'm doing. It has to be better, because I was listening to this like blown away by Revelator and just like knew that I had the time to just be like, okay, I'm gonna. So that aspect remained the same. I wouldn't say I worked as slowly as I did not work as slowly as I thought I would, but I worked slowly considering the circumstances. And then there were a couple others. Sometimes there's little things about writing or approaching something that I'll be like, I'm not really gonna do that on this album as much or whatever.
Yeah, and like with horror as the this like very consistent element of this album, in your opinion, what makes delving into social commentary through the lens of horror effective? Like, does horror as an art form unlock something for you as a writer, strengthen the impact of the writing, or contextualize it in an interesting way?
I feel like the answer to that is got to be yes, right? I mean, I certainly have read things people have written about horror's place in terms of social commentary and things that are probably more deeply considered than what I could come up with right now. But I do think that I think one thing is my familiarity. Or I mean, it wasn't just I read like every genre of everything like as a kid, but I was definitely into like books of like like not the hard sci-fi, but stuff like Ray Bradbury and like dystopian type things. And then I also was into horror stories and I feel like I've always had a dark sense of humor and been I never was like grim or whatever things didn't like bother me. Like I remember my mother giving me the lottery to read when I was a little kid, uh, and being like, that was the type of story that would like just absolutely like capture my imagination sometimes. And also seeing how with horror, it's definitely a place where you can choose how much to show. Like sometimes you scare, sometimes something's frightening, you frighten people or you bring about certain things by what isn't shown.
Hmm.
Like there same thing, there's horror movies where it's like, we're gonna show you the axe chop and then the stump of the arm stump flailing around and blood jetting out. And then there's really scary horror movies where it's just all in what isn't shown. All in what you allow the mind to fill in the blanks on the atmosphere itself. I used to think about, did you ever watch that movie, The Babadook?
No, I didn't.
Okay, it's like a weird, maybe Australian horror movie, psychological thriller. I feel
Hmm.
like people call it a psychological thriller when it's they want they want people who don't go to see horror movies to go see it. But yeah, it's a horror movie. It's a good one. That one was one. I watched that. I watched that on tour, on a little short tour years ago with Prem Rock, Curly Castro, and Mo Nichols. I forget whose crib we watched that at. But we were on the road, and we watched that, and that was like right after one of those times where you stay back in the day, you're on tour and sometimes somebody offers or somebody's like, hey, my cousin or something has a place we can stay here.
Mm.
And you're like, all right, cool, because every penny counts, So you're like, shit, we just played Vermont to 8 people. I hope that we can not pay for a hotel room and not sleeping on the floor. And this guy had a whole nice house, and we went and stayed there. And then that turned into a horror movie.
Was it
So
like a
it's
very remote
it
area that the
wasn't
house
it
is in?
wasn't so remote. We were in Vermont, but that was after the Babadook. We had watched the Babadook the night before somewhere else, also with a rather odd host, but on a different level. But yeah, we we stayed at this other house, and the host just got increasingly weird as the night went on. Um, it's also weird when you're places, because when you're in New York City, you're like, all right, you're being weird, whatever. But in a lot of other places, you're like, oh, this person has a bunch of guns in here.
That's true.
In America, you'd be like, this person, it's like weird dudes. It's just like all of a sudden they like you realize they own 8 firearms, which makes it harder to go to sleep when somebody's behavior becomes erratic.
For sure. My Canadian ass doesn't really relate to that, but I can imagine. I'd probably be more scared.
It's crazy. To be honest, I don't know how. Whenever they're like, and this is not making light of mental illness or anything, but when they're like, oh, this person was having, mental health struggles or whatever, and you live in a house with them and they own gun, like, I can't.
Yeah,
I I'm too paranoid of a person. I can't.
I feel you on that.
You're hearing voices and shit and you have firearms. I gotta go.
Mm.
But anyway, yeah, that was a scary night. But night before that, we had watched this movie, The Babadook, and like it was scary, man. It's weird though with horror. There's two types of people who like to watch horror. There's people like me who watch and do get scared, and then there's people who don't really get scared. It's all differing levels of being funny to them.
Mm.
Like the type of person who, if you're not talking about like the most jump scare, grotesque, crazy shit, they'll just be like, oh, that wasn't scary. Rosemary Baby isn't scary. It's funny. Like, wow. I actually got scared. We were watching that one.
My
Uh,
girlfriend's really into horror, and I was like trying to think about a movie to watch tonight. Maybe The Babadook's the one. I don't know.
yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. And I think it also operates in an area where like a terrifying thing for a parent is like a fear of hating your own child.
Yo, okay. It's so funny you say that. So like, are you familiar with Hinge?
Yeah, I know what it is.
Yeah, so one of the like you select prompts and like one of the like three prompts I have is like my biggest fear is and then and you fill out the answer and mine was like my biggest fear is that my child fucking sucks. And that's like that actually is so real. Like I
I
don't
mean,
have children yet.
that would be really real
Like they're just
because
really
like,
lame or
damn,
bad person. Like fuck, man.
it's a shitload of work, money, and effort, and your actual genetic material to put into something
And that's the return on investment,
difficult.
man. Like fuck.
You're like, all right, after all that, we have a person who stays in their room, rage posting on the internet and eating hot pockets. That would be that would be a bad return on investment, I think.
Indeed,
But
indeed.
yeah, so it is a good movie. Watch that.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely will add to the list there. Might watch it tonight. And you know, like when we're talking about like horror being an effective medium and all that, I feel like as a listener, I feel like that horror framing might actually make it more effective as a way to like grasp these like dark and morbid situations that could be depicted in songs like on this album, because I think it may circumvent that regular mental programming we all have to some extent or another as humans, where like, you know, stories of a family being evicted on week before Christmas or war overseas, all of these like genuinely awful things, they unfortunately don't really feel like anything special because we just flip through the news or we encounter it daily, and it's something we're kind of becoming numb to. And this framing, this horror framing, I feel kind of like actually accentuates the realness of what you're speaking on, because it can go past that numbness where these horror story imageries can be grounded in this real life situation that still feels novel to the listener because we're reacting to it in the guise of like supernatural monsters or like spooky stories that we're not used to. So I feel like the effect actually might be even heightened because of that.
Yeah, I mean that seems to be that sounds like an astute observation.
Yeah, and then there's also the linkage, the natural linkage between like dehumanization that comes from oppression, general racism, and then like the literally non-human monsters found in horror stories. I also just find that's like a pretty cool connection.
And of course, then then you get into dystopian and sci-fi stuff as well, where you I think about that run of like Corinthians through all these worlds. Sorry, ending in Maquiladoras.
Oh, including that. Okay, yeah, 7 to 10.
I might include that. It seems sort of suspended outside of time a little bit. Like Davino's verse is grounded, but has it sounds like now because of some of the terminology, but it has a universality to it. Yeah, I feel like the mood of the song and everything. There is maybe that is now. There is something about it that to me kind of sits in that. It's like a Black Mirror episode that isn't set in the future. It's kind of set now. Same thing with like all these worlds are yours. It's definitely in the now and in there's this utopian futurism to it, I think, a little bit that happens both lyrically and in how the music develops as the song continues. Then I feel like
100%.
tap out of that part of the record with Doll Full of Pins.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I like that what you're saying. It's like kind of suspended in time, or that track with Al Divino specifically. You have, I feel like one of the most striking set of lyrics, like honestly, I've ever heard from you. Starting from that point where you rap, amputation is how you survive. Can't get away if you don't leave something behind. Like that part, man, that part really struck me, and I want to zero in on it a bit more because it's really run through my mind ever since about a month ago, this specific moment I had with it. So like, I'll just paint the picture real quick. It was Easter weekend. My family, unfortunately, we had like a really big fight. So I went on a walk close to midnight trying to just clear my head, and I played this album. And I sat on a bench, childhood park in my hometown, and the song with Davino came on. It was serendipitous how this idea you spoke to on needing to let something go as a means to survive, to move forward, came right at a time where I was contemplating if I should like let go of this desire to have a strong, healthy relationship with my family and just kind of maybe find peace without it, because it was becoming really hard to see how that could happen. And this idea of needing to leave something behind to survive just really punched me in the face, and it's been something I've been trying to grapple with because I also feel on the other side like a desire to, you know, not give up and keep trying for this dream in this case of mine to come true. So I'd like it if you could expand on this idea because I want to better understand your
Both of those are
perspective.
valid perspectives, right?
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah.
If you're going to choose to leave something behind, make sure you can live without that hand. Don't fool yourself into into thinking that everything's going to be the same. But sometimes you might be better off without it and all the things that it comes with.
Yeah, because I guess it's a bit of a philosophical question. Because like, how do you know when it's time to like quote unquote amputate versus finding a way to keep it going or keep that thing or that person in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think then at the end you come to a thing where it's like some took it on the arm, caught in a trap. Some came of their own accord, a piece already cut. So like sort of illustrating the range of circumstances in which, because there's also something that seems sort of so anti-ethical to being a human being as to like to come of your own accord, having already, I mean, amputated yourself. It's a sort of preemptive offering as opposed to the person who's caught in the trap. So I think both presenting the idea and grappling with it a little bit. I think there's the idea that there's no clean getaways, that resistance comes with its own price. There's an idea of sacrifice and self-sacrifice, not necessarily in a positive way. I think what sacrifices people may make and at what altars they're going to place those gory offerings.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that part was just also like my personal anecdote and connection to it aside. Like, it's just fascinating to hear you speak on a political figure or like a political theory in such a and like comment on it in such an explicit way because that's not something you normally do like that, you know, this is what someone said and like, obviously you did it in a very poetic way, but
I mean, I think sometimes I do it in like two lines instead of like a whole verse.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's more, I think it's not just about what he said, but thinking about the humanity in that situation and thinking about when I found out how he had died, I already known about him for a long time. And Frantz Fanon would be somebody who I went to several stages in my life of thinking about Frantz Fanon and his work. You know what I mean? Like from like this infallible genius figure, and he is a brilliant mind and an incredible writer. To like there are aspects of which digging into his rhetoric and his writing at other points in life, I didn't always I had different critiques at times than I had at previous points. But then way later coming to this understanding of like how he died and the great sort of irony in that. He
Mhm.
dies at Wall Street Army Hospital. And then just also thinking about and considering the human aspect of that. Like that's at a certain point, some of us, not everybody, are going to have moments to realize that this is the sum of your life. This is where you are now. And having been around people who suffer through debilitating diseases like that and then perished, I know that there's got to be, yeah, I'm just coming at it from that perspective of at time, the our own lives can be a revelation and a surprise to us or a nightmare all at the same time, and just thinking about what was he thinking about at that point?
Yeah, like keeping with that theme of like survival, we have the closing track, Dislocated, and the way I take in this track, it sounds like you're writing about self-preservation, not letting people get too close, hiding as a means of survival. And it's just really striking painting this picture. And I'm just wondering what was that picture exactly or feeling you were trying to paint with this song, and why did it feel particularly fitting as the record's closing statement?
Well, I mean, Elucid has done a lot of the hard work on some of my album closers recently.
Mm.
Because we got As the Crow Flies, we got this, and we got
Magdalene.
Magdalene. That's a strong trio.
It is.
Do I have a better three without him? I guess I could do Red
Smithing Cross
Dust,
is high.
Smith and Cross. The Wake though.
Yeah, The Wake is like that. I mean, that's like the
Yeah.
song that got me into you, like in a
Yeah,
real way.
that's a good shout out, Willie Green. So yeah, but anyway, the fact of the matter, he's done a lot of great. We've made a lot of great closers together, and I think in terms of what my verse is about, I think there are multiple levels, but I think you got it. Yeah, that's the majority of it is about hiding even within yourself, not wanting to be seen or controlling the ways in which one is seen, or not having control of the ways in which one is seen. It's kind of in that way a little bit of a flip side of something like Corinthians, which is about seeing. And that verse is about being seen or not being seen, or not being present, not allowing people and things to find your true self. In my mind, when I was doing it, I kind of had the idea of like, oh, it's going to be the video, I think is amazing. It didn't end up, but in my mind, when I'm writing it, I was thinking very visually. Obviously, it's something about being seen. I wanted to make it very visual. And I was thinking about this scene that's like in the forest that would constantly pull out from like a tight close up of this like face rubbed with camouflage, charcoal or whatever, pull out through this whole thing. And then at the end, it's like a painting. And then thinking of like how people would have paintings and then they would paint another painting over it. And that's what an underpainting is. Sometimes to hide a painting or a valuable painting or whatever, people would paint another painting over it. And the underpainting is still there. So like nobody knows you have, a Picasso or whatever until you take that off. That was how I was thinking about it when I was writing it.
Well, that's a really cool picture. I mean, yeah, that video, the video for that record is pretty
Rio's
incredible.
crazy, man. He's crazy. First time I saw him was he had done a video. I was at Al's crib and he played me this video. It hadn't dropped yet of Mike on an Al beat. It was on one of those EPs.
Mm.
Uh, and the way he was just using shadow and light was crazy. It was just Mike walking through like the projects or whatever. Just and the textures was just amazing. It's been really cool to work with him and Joseph recently because they have such different ways of like working both to make such singular amazing art. Like Rio's the type of guy where you're like, you get to the shot and it's like the lights going, and we came here specifically at this time. You're like, all right, and he'll take 30 minutes to set up for the shot, and you're kind of thinking, damn, the light's leaving. We might be. He shoot that bitch once or twice, and be like, all right, cool, and go to the next. And in my mind, I'm like, shouldn't we get some safety shot? What if these aren't the ones? But I think it's like it's very precise. He like finds his vision, takes his time to get and then he takes that shot and he moves. Joseph is somebody who I think really he does so much magic in post production and editing room, and also which Rio does too, because some of that stuff is beautiful. But he's more like me. He's more like, let's make sure, let's try that, let's make sure we have the things, and it's just sort of flowing with it in a different way, faster. It's kind of like you're like, man, I hope this is gonna work out. And then you see the shit, you're like, yo, that's crazy. Every shot he took, well, that's not true, but something where you're like, man, 70% of what we shot is there on the screen. 70-80% of what we shot is there on the screen.
Yeah, I think everything really came together beautifully with that song. So I just think it's the perfect closer because it just generates such an emotional response in me. Like I just feel like that feeling of hiding. I just feel a bit of a sadness. I feel a bit of a I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it really just gets me like super sobering. That's the way I guess the best way to say it. Super sobering
Word.
song.
No, I love, man. I'm not even gonna hold you. I fuck with that song. I think that's one of the best Armand Hammer songs of all time, me personally.
I agree. I really agree. And you know when people talk about your music generally, there's this like, and obviously you're aware of this. There's this perception that it's just, you know, so inherently complicated, heady, abstract. But I don't really feel, and many others who like listen to your music closer don't really feel that's always necessarily the case because your music in a lot of ways is very grounded, than much more grounded than some people portray it as. And I wonder how you feel about that descriptor of abstract being applied to your art. Is this something you think is accurate, or do you not see it that way? Does it bother you?
I think sometimes I am disappointed when, people send you particularly crazy takes on something that you're like, but you're missing the beauty of the whole thing by not just saying it's the story about being in love with a girl, like, which an interesting thing that perhaps you could also relate to. But first of all, on the internet, there's lots of people to say lots of things. So it's like people say a lot of things. And secondly, yeah, sometimes I am more so disappointed that I would be like, wow, it's unfortunate that somebody would be going there, while also recognizing that there's room to look at art and to find meaning that the creator might not have intended. I believe that that is a valid position for someone to have. Somebody could have, there could be a decolonial aspect to Star Wars, whether that's what, Lucas intended or not. But sometimes you read things and you'll be like, man, that's unfortunate that that was the takeaway because it's so far afield and there's interesting stuff in there that I would have hoped that the person would have mind. By getting angry, that seems overmuch. I mean, you make art and you put it out into the world. You don't then also get to follow everyone around and make sure that, or I shouldn't say what people get. I don't have the time and energy to follow people around and be like, you're no, if I see if somebody talks to me or something, I'm happy to talk about it. But you make the art, you put it into the world. It's like your kids. You said you hope your kid doesn't grow up to be a terrible person. At a certain point, it's like your kid goes out into the world and they are what they are. And, if some people come up to you and they're like, man, your kid is absolute asshole, then it's like, you know, or you're like, they're like, that's not even a good example. If somebody's like, your kid has a bad temper. And you're like, honestly, I never see that.
Yeah.
But maybe you're right because it's out. My kid's out in the world. Maybe he goes out in the world and gets in his car and just goes crazy behind the wheel. I don't really know, but I can tell you what I know about it, and we can go from there. Or whether I think that you may be misunderstanding something, but yeah, ultimately, I feel there's a certain perspective in which you make art, and it goes into the world and it does its thing. I'm certainly allowed to say my opinion or whatever, but I'm not gonna be out here hunting down every person's opinion to refute it.
Yeah, like I feel like with that idea of abstract in your music, like I think this is something I mentioned to you the first time you came on the show was that like I called it like this slipperiness in the way you write sometimes to where like you can like you within verses can kind of flip between perspectives, between being personal, between being metaphorical, kind of like on the, flip of a dime or whatever. And I think that's where your art being quote unquote abstract does begin to resonate with me because like I feel like you can in a within like these self like you said like those self-contained worlds that you build in these songs, like what you're saying could be relatively like grounded, straightforward. But I see the abstraction more specifically in how you're able to connect these different sets of concrete ideas together to where like the ideas can be delivered in like a variety of forms, like fictional characters, some real person, some first person introspection. No matter the type of song, I see the abstract in how you're able to world build through these songs as the sum of their parts with so many rich layers that add up to some kind of poignant statement or atmosphere. You actually like ended up saying something I was going to quote, which is funny, earlier, where with Paul Thompson, you said like you have these different stories tied together by some thread, and where you're able to make stories that are self-contained but fit into the same universe. And I just feel like that's exactly what you did here.
Thanks. No, that's cool. I think an example of what you're talking about might be a song like a Doll Full of Pins, which really finally came together through the efforts of, I mean, obviously me. but Yolanda Watson and Jeff Markey as the primary two primary factors, and then Masai Music as well, and Steel Tip Dub engineering the session. We all just sort of came together to make that more than the sum of its parts. And I would say that that song is one of the ones that sticks with me. The end result of the song that we have is one that sticks with me. And I think about, because like it starts off, to me, obviously other people may not be, but to me, it's very, very, very granularly specific situation. Gotten myself into a sticky situation, you know, digging yourself out of these graves. You realize that you're in an untenable situation around dangerous people, and how you approach that, and it's very much in its place is, you know, to me it feels like its place, like DC, the summer, the languid feel, the heat that and the horn just amplifies all of that. Then after the chorus and the implication and the lyrics of the chorus and how they play into the first verse, and then how also that carries into the second verse, which probably is more, for lack of a better word, more abstract. The interesting thing is that it kind of comes back to the same place at the very end of it, while also introducing ideas of childhood and other things like that. At the end of the song, it's like, yeah, you got to pay that fee. Just have the dough. And then the piper, like people paying for the things that they, you know, eventually the bill comes due for the things that you're doing. Those aspects all kind of tie it back to the beginning, even though the second verse and the first verse are very different in how they're approaching, you know.
Yeah, like I mean that's exactly kind of why that's exactly an example of what I was talking about, where it's like it's that nuance that you're able to make these connections and make it be like cohesive while still, you know, it's not like every word is this like flowery, crazy out there thing, you know. You could be talking about very literal things, but these connections are what I think really elevates your music and just makes it so fucking rewarding to, you know, keep listening back to.
Cool, good. I'm glad. That's my hope.
And and like throughout your career, you've obviously like delved into storytelling your raps consistently. And on this album, I feel there is definitely like a strong emphasis on telling stories, particularly with elements of like horror, dark humor, and like as an artist, like what does storytelling unlock for you, like or enable you to do or explore that other forms of traditional lyricism do not?
I think all of them, you're always trying to say something. So all the different ways of communicating are valuable to me. And that's one that I happen to be good at. You know, I don't necessarily need that from another artist. That like lots of art rappers who don't tell stories, or but I do appreciate it myself. Like I think about the Juggernauts, Clear Blue Skies, and
Mm.
songs I'm gonna kill you, Lucifer, Clear Blue Skies, and just be blown away that somebody could do that while also being forced to operate within the strictures of like a rap song.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like with storytelling in your music, like it's just it's definitely one of your superpowers, and I think this album really flexes that because it just allows you to go to down so many cool rabbit holes and pull out really cool reflections and all of that. And if we move to the production, like right from the opening note of this album, like the tone is set that this is gonna be like a very interesting horrifying type record here with this incredibly eerie instrumental from the great Steel Tip Dove. And from that point on, obviously the instrumentals don't let up and maintain this like dark, surreal atmosphere. And I have this RMPP patron question from Sean Alexander, not to be confused with the former Seahawks running back, who is wondering, how did you collaborate with your team of producers on this record when it came to getting this consistent feeling soundscape? Did you nudge them in this like musical direction, give them notes on the sonic palette you were going for?
You're pretty young to know who Sean Alexander is.
How? He had his that was wasn't it '06 when he had his crazy like that's the year before I
Yeah,
started
that's
watching.
maybe, yeah, maybe '06. I mean, still,
I mean,
I'm,
I like became a big fan of the NFL in 2007. Like the first game I watched was the '06 Super Bowl. So like I missed it by a year, but I mean, I played Madden and shit, so I knew who he was.
Yeah. Him or Marshawn Lynch?
Oh, like in terms of who I like think is better?
Who is better? Now, who is your favorite? We know
Ma
people.
I think I don't have his stats in front of me, but like I feel like Marshawn because Sean fell the fuck off right after that year. So like I feel like he had maybe one decent year after '06. So Marshawn I feel like had impact and he had impact on winning, like all the intangibles that like the effect he had on that team. Like I'd pick Marshawn personally.
Hold on, did they or did they not go to the Super Bowl?
They did, but like I mean, they didn't win it, and I don't think they were a very winning team with him. But again, it's not like he's a running back. He's not. He had to do with Matt Hasselback, who was, you know,
No,
kind
no,
of.
I don't know if that's true either. Because in those days, it wasn't like if your QB isn't the greatest,
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's a good point.
I'm looking at it. Okay, 9,500 on the ground. Marshawn has more yards, but he played 12 seasons.
Yeah, he had more longevity. Like that's kind of what I meant. Like the peak of Sean Alexander is not touched
We're
by
not putting
Marshawn.
Emmitt Smith over Barry Sanders. Touchdowns, it's 112 for Sean in 9 years to 94 for Marshawn in 12 seasons.
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats now. Like I was saying, I can't comment. Like I didn't watch him live, so I can't really feel. It was '05 the year he had that, not '06.
Yeah. I
He had a
mean, the thing
5 year
that I
run that
would
was
say though
crazy.
is the thing that I would say though is Sean Alexander, the offensive line they had for him was crazy.
Oh yeah. They had Hall of Famers, I
Like there were
think.
probably two Hall of Famers on that line.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, got way off of the topic. Well, I think you try to learn from each project and I think get better at putting songs together and also knowing, hey, this song might be good here. And then sometimes getting with producers who you have that level of trust and connection with, where you can be like, hey, Jeff Markey, I need this beat. This is the song before the song. Now we got I have somewhat of the framework of the record. The song I'm making, I want it to go here. Can you like make that work sonically?
So
Oh,
you told them like the subject matter and like what you were hoping it could
it
sound like.
depends on which
Yeah.
situations. Like all these worlds are yours. All these worlds are yours was like the last song we did. And so, I was like, Haram, here's the song before, here's the song after, this is what it's gonna sound like. Or the woman who played piano after Black Christmas
Mhm.
and plays a piano outro on Black Christmas. I gave her the sort of ending of Black Christmas and the beginning of Waterproof Mascara, maybe.
Yeah, that's the next track.
And then she did the piano thing. And then I went to Willie Green and was like, all right, here's some other ideas I have sonically of like making this happen. I think knowing better what I would know, just knowing what you're doing and where things are going and how you want things to sound, and then also collab certain people, bring you in a little deeper on the project and be like, hey, I need you to come all the way in and see the inner workings and make this work, for me. Whether that's Steel Tip Dove, who a lot of times is very privy to how the album's being put together. And like, yo, this is the next song. How can we Jeff Markey, Willie Green, obviously mixing stuff, people who helped create transition things like Meta Rasmussen from Oxa, the band that we put out
Hmm.
on, just one of the best saxophone players in the whole world. And it's just nice enough to come through the studio and play stuff. And we're like, here's the part we're trying to bridge or whatever.
Did she do the doll full of pins sex?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay, man, that shit's
And
beautiful.
then and
Holy
then
shit.
and then and then Jeff Markey sampled and flipped it and then worked with Messiah Music on building out a bigger beat, and then brought her sax back in the beat later. And also she played the connecting part that from Maquiladoras into Doll Full of Pins. Or Anissa Antar who sings I'm like, oh, I need this to go here. So,
Yeah, I was wondering if that I was like, that's not Yolanda Watson. I didn't get the name because it wasn't credited officially, but man, her singing on the end of that
It's in the liner notes of the record and everything. But yeah,
yeah. I mean just like the on like streaming or whatever. It's that singing is so incredible. Like and there's something really just it's not sad is like the wrong word, but it feels so emotional. Fuck man. It's a that's a great bridge.
thanks. And same thing with Pitchforks and Halos. By then, I played Kenny the beat after we'd made the song, but he heard it where it was going, and then he went back and did some stuff to sort of change and make it feel, at least to him, that it sounded better coming out of LP's beat, which obviously is incredible.
Yeah, like the way that you like you're describing here the collaboration, like I can't help but think about some of the influences your last Armand Hammer record with the Lucid diabetic test strips would have might may have had on how you approach things because like the that was like at that point your most progressive and ambitious album musically you'd been a part of, and just hearing about like just the finesse in how well you were able to bring so many different people onto one vision, like it's incredible because this record is so damn consistent. Maybe you're like I would say probably my favorite production from you on a solo record is this one, and it's just because of how consistent the tension, that disorientation, the drama is in all these beats. It's just ridiculous. And the fact that it fits thematically with like what you're talking about too.
Sure, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot, man. I think it's a really well produced album, and feel like the label has had a bunch of them recently.
Yeah.
I always thought I Told Bessie was like one of the best produced records that we've had, my personal opinion, especially in terms of like multiple producers. Decay is like
Oh
probably
yeah.
those masterpiece as far as sonically what he was doing there. You know, we've had a few different things. I really really looking forward to making some songs with Blockhead again too. He sent me some beats that were really dope, but they just weren't the right chamber for this project. I'm always like, man, we've made so many good songs. I was listening to the Aux. I was like, man, there's joints on here. Another great Armand Hammer song, one of my favorite Armand Hammer songs that's not on an Armand Hammer album is Be Safe. Yeah. If I was making a top 10 Armand Hammer songs that aren't on Armand Hammer albums, that would definitely be 100% in there. Maybe top five even. I really like it.
You know, as a longtime collaborator of Willie Green's, you know, his work has become synonymous with yours and kind of Backwoodz generally, and vice versa. And when I think about these things that I was describing that was achieved, like that feeling of tension, disorientation we get from the beats, the bits of movie dialogue and like horror effects sprinkled in throughout the record, the importance of him at the boards just like could not be more clear. There's so many details in these songs that would not have been as fleshed out clearly if it had not been for like the excellent work mixing, mastering this thing. Can you illustrate how you worked with him to put those additional touches? Like I'm talking about all those like dialogues and effects and like how important he was to the creative process for this overall.
Well, A, everything you're saying is true. B, some of those effects, it's tough because there's so many layers of things, and like some of those samples that are in a song, sometimes I put them in, sometimes they came to me like that, like the Conductor Williams song. You know, there's a couple little things that were added. The woman saying, answer the goddamn phone.
That was so
Uh,
good.
that is the best. She has a great voice. But most of the stuff in there, the horror movie stuff, that's how the beat came to me, just by chance. But obviously, there is stuff that was added with me and Green, and then there's lots of stuff he's doing on his own because he knows what he's doing. So I really will have no problem stepping back and letting Willie Green and the producers kind of like figure out how to make it sound right. And then I'll be like, oh, I don't, maybe if I don't like it or something, I'll say so. He just knows he's forgotten way more than me about sonics. And, so I'm always like, he'll ask me for some prompts or ideas or thoughts, and then he does his thing, and then we go from there. And, sometimes there's something where you're like, oh, let's dial it in a little different. But again, that a lot of times the producers I work with want to be involved. And so it'll be like Kenny talking to Willie Green about, oh, this, that, and the third. Or maybe Willie Green being like, hey, Dove, I went and I did this or whatever. And Dove will be like, yo, that's fucking crazy. That sounds so good. So it's a lot of back and forth between the producers and Willie Green as the sort of ringmaster of it all that I can't provide a whole lot of insight on, but it is crucial and important and valuable.
With all this said, though, like as we're talking about all this like serious, like this darkness in the album and all these serious topics, like with all that said, I don't want to make it seem like I feel the album is like only this dark, harrowing experience because you're still able to litter it with many moments of like levity, dark humor, and I feel honestly some of your best sports references yet, in particular, like obviously the
Killing
Darko
me.
Milicic line, like that,
Killing
that's
me.
that's crazy. Bruiser helped you with that Frank Gore bar, but that Coach Tibbs line in particular, man, I don't know if that's gonna age all that well if the Knicks go all the way this year.
Well, what does that have to do with it?
When you say grind them down, you're talking about like their his own
And
team
we'll
because
see
he,
what happens to your career. But
yeah,
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 that,
yeah. That's what I mean. Like it runs
I
them
mean,
down
I'm
40
not
plus
like
minutes.
when he was the Bulls coach, it wasn't like I hated him or anything, but do I think that some of those people's careers, Noah and Rose, would have been different with a different system of player usage? Yes.
True.
But the Bulls also had a good run and had a shot. So you get what you get.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. It's just especially because the timing now, like it seems like the seas have
Well, the
parted.
Knicks are
Even
not going to win a championship. So let's just not be
I
ridiculous.
actually don't even think I don't if they beat the Celtics, which I do think they will. I don't think they're beating the Pacers. I actually think the Pacers are just gonna flatly beat them, but I
It
hope
doesn't
not.
matter. The Knicks are not winning type of NBA unless it would require such a run of injuries. I mean, I guess that's how the Celtics got there last year, but I just don't think the Knicks, like, what Western Conference team are they going to beat?
I don't think that. I think the Nuggets. I think all three of the possibilities right now are gonna beat them. Yeah, that's funny that because yeah, I was thinking of like, oh, that line's gonna sound funny if the Knicks do win it all, but like again, it's not like it makes it wrong, but I get you know my point. I'm just saying like it reminds me of that line on The Foreigner where you say, "This is professional football, we don't run the option," because like when that dropped, like at the time that like I was like, yeah, there's RG3, there's Kaepernick, but they were regarded as like flashes in the pan, like arguably gimmicky. You can't really win like that. But now it's like the whole fucking game
I don't
has
even think
changed.
that I don't even think that. No, 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 no. Wait. At the time that I wrote that song, I don't even think that Kaepernick was a thing.
Did you? Oh, so you must have wrote it like before 2012, like when the album came out, but you had wrote it before
When does Kaepernick start playing?
2012.
Okay. So
And
yes,
it,
I had written it before 2012. Green Bay Packers win the Super Bowl in 2011. Horrible blight on all that is good in the world. And then Kaepernick starts playing, and he just would always cook them in the
oh
playoffs.
my
They all,
God,
it
man.
doesn't matter what happens. It's the best. He cooked them in the playoffs a couple times. So no, that hadn't happened yet. I think maybe RG3 had happened.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's the point. Like, I actually think that was spot on, even if it was written in 2012, because like they were highly doubted as like you can't really win like this. Like, yeah, and then for a while it was the truth, but now it's like everything's changed with how mobile the quarterbacks are.
Yeah, for sure. Although, I don't know. It still seems like read option is definitely what read option QB has won the Super Bowl. Not saying people can run. I'm not even saying that. But like what's a really heavy read option system that's gone to win the Super Bowl?
I mean, heavy read option. Like, I don't think Hertz actually really runs that often at all. I think the guys that do kind of suck. Like, okay, I guess Lamar, and even then he doesn't run it a lot like that anymore.
Lamar
He
hasn't won the Super Bowl.
Okay. Yeah, but let's okay. I consider him like Super Bowl caliber quarterback, even if he
Sure.
didn't win it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe the best but I'm just saying it's not like it's been like completely disproven.
Yeah, that's a fair
Read
point.
option plays. How many read option plays does Philly running a game.
Yeah, I don't think they run like
They
one
run
every
their
couple
rugby
games.
play more often than they do that.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. Fair point. So like if we look forward now, I have an RMPP patron question from Cian Walker, hope I'm saying your name right, and Joshua Davis that want to know about your plans to write a novel in the future. I think this is something you've mentioned before. It might even be a memoir. Can you say anything more about that?
I have a book that I'm writing. Let's hope that it comes out and is good. A memoir. You know, I've been writing things my whole life. So I'd like to do another book with my friend, like A is for Anarchist,
Mm.
with Mara. That was really fun and cool. But yeah, I have a memoir, I have a publisher. Let's see what happens.
And that's something maybe could we expect next year, or is that you don't even know?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
Theoretically, yes, but who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe they won't like it and that'll be that.
Right. Okay. Well, that's exciting. I really fucked with A's for Anarchists. Like I got that one. It's just a really cool read, and it's so fucking beautiful with the
Yeah,
illustrations.
really great artwork by Myra. And Rizzoli put together a pretty solid book, so not mad.
Anything like upcoming music wise that people should expect for this year, or just like key happenings, merch, tour dates?
Premrock is on the road in Europe with Shrapnel, and then he's going to join me on tour. But I'm starting off with playing Atlanta with Cavalier, Phoenix with Dose One, whose record really started our year off in amazing fashion.
Yeah.
Successful for us. Great guy to work with. I'm looking forward to doing that show with him. Cav, I don't even need to get into that. Then Quelle, Chris, and I are going to go on tour on the West Coast. So that seems cool. I would go see that show. Quelle to me is one of the very best out there right now, period. Yeah, and then Prem and I are going to be on the road. The band Oxa is on the road right now in Europe. I think they might be in the US this summer. And yeah, records this year. We're going to have a preservation project. There's going to be the first Elucid project on the label since Bessie
Oh,
um,
really? This year?
this
Shit.
year.
Wow.
There's going to be some interesting little side project things that I think are going to be cool, limited things that we're going to put out soon. I think there's going to be an Armand Hammer record this year. I think there might be a Human Error Club record this year.
I've heard about that. I mean, that fucking dislocated, if that's a sign. Holy shit.
Right, they're incredible. Probably forgotten some things, but the surprises are good, you know. Fielded, she put out her album Chuckles Deluxe this year independently. Would love to have her an album from her on Backwoodz next year. Yeah, some interesting things potentially cooking up for next year too.
Yeah, that Human Error Club one really like I mean shout out to Fielded though. That record is I love it. That Human Error Club, man, that they I've gotten them only familiar with them really after I had seen Michaela do drumming for Benjamin Booker and Kenny Siegel on their show in Toronto and like we had chatted and then I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you like I didn't know his background and I checked his shit out. It's so interesting. All improvisational. It's like it's
Yeah, it's
really
really
cool to
great.
see what you guys
And
do."
Kenny's super involved in that project. So anything Kenny's doing, we always like to be around for that. Blockhead has a project that I don't have permission to really get into any detail on, but maybe it'll be this year, maybe
Mm.
next. By the way, I think it's going to be interesting.
I think it would be interesting. I hope. I hope.
So yeah, I think that's a good description of what's coming. Like I said, there's a couple small limited edition things that probably coming in the next few months too that I'm excited to see how they turn out in terms of like signature pieces of vinyl. Yeah, that's it.
Man, that's dope. All right, well, I think we can wrap the conversation here. Yeah, this new record is just unbelievable. I think it's really up there with your best. It could end up going down as my favorite from you as a solo record. And it genuinely just makes me feel really warm and hopeful seeing how your art is like continuing to receive the claim it deserves and spreading to larger audiences. And because I know how much time and care you put into not only your work, but elevating others through Backwoodz. So, Yeah, all of this is really well deserved.
And all of those people have helped elevate me, So it's like a mutual thing. Like making an album like this took Lucid, took Cavalier, took Yolanda Watson, took Aram, Shabaka, Alchemist. People don't even talk about that song, but to me, and I understand why, but to me, it's a key transitionary one, and like, yeah, I just love the vibe of that song. Willie Green also coming through with that one Willie Green beat, like he does.
Always, it's always
That
killer too.
one perfect beat, and that one really hits the notes. Human Error Club, that finish, and Kenny Siegel really playing an instrumental part in making that song happen on every level. He was key in making that song happen. Steel Tip Dove engineering all this shit, and then being there to throw me beats too. The people at Rhymesayers who were like, "Hey, put you together with Ant and do something," and coming through with that. So it's like putting yourself in positions with generous, talented people to help each other and to like push each other to do more. I think it's a Bruiser Wolf. That's my guy. Bruiser
Fucking
Wolf.
slayed that verse, man.
I
God
both
damn.
did a great job with this beat and was really generous because there are actually two songs, but we'll discuss that later. Theravada, also shout out Theravada. Those two, Andrew Broder. A lot of people played little parts that
Interesting.
aren't obvious or immediately credited. Meta, like you can't make Doll Full of Pins doesn't exist without her doing what she did. Even something like Corinthians, the woman reading Chinese and the translation, that woman actually gave me the book Diary of a Madman that made me, it was a cool thing to read and inspired.
So that way,
So
that was someone you knew. That wasn't like dialogue from something. She like
no, I
wrote.
know that person.
Oh wow, that's cool.
We're friends. She gave me that book, Diary of a Madman. And I was like, just like this classic piece of Chinese horror literature. And then I read it. I was on tour, got the book, was reading it, flying around, being like, this is bugged out. Yeah, anyway, from the little smallest pieces to, you know, my friend's wife in London or Bristol who sent me 12 different voice notes for that little Gollywog reference. A horrible, evil thing, whatever it is at the beginning. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, yeah. Especially knowing how busy you are. Thanks for the time coming on the show, and I'll see you in. I think it's October where you're coming to Toronto. That's gonna be major.
It will be fun. All right, if you need anything, hit me up.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to not only support the show, but join the fastest growing community of like-minded indie rap fans, go to patreon.com, search for the Rap Music Plug podcast, and become a patron. You will gain access to an exclusive patron-only Discord that me and 70 plus people engage with on the regular, as well as other patron-only benefits such as bonus episodes, album recommendation reviews, early access to regular episodes, and much more. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.